Thank you, thank you. I'm really excited to be here and really honored to be speaking with these other three wonderful speakers. Just to start my work a little about me, I work with often book paper and sheets of steel, not that many at a time. Both of these start, as linear items. We often think about steel as being really hard and paper being really soft, but in a lot of ways they move the same way. Here's an example of, starting with something flat to create form. Here's an example of that piece finished. And my work is exploring that relationship between these two materials that to me, are very similar. And so the idea of crafty intimacy, I wanted to kind of, that's a little cheeky title, but to me, craft is about, relationship, communication, dedication, and a familiarity. This started when this conversation in my head, with pet peeves. I was getting familiar with steel, I was getting familiar with custom metalwork, and I was running my hand under everything, and what they call like a furniture proctologist, when people look underneath the table. And so I was getting into that, and I was working for Haas Haley at the time, who's a mentor and a hero of mine, and I say, hey Haas, do you have pet peeves, like when screw heads are sticking out or something like that? He says, no, I don't really have pet peeves. I have an intimacy with this material that, makes me want to do better for it. And so that kind of changed my mind about my relationship with my material. And what I was able to do is start to focus when working on, this communication, this back and forth I was having with the steel. Often people think, oh, you're a metal worker, you just hammer and you get all of your aggression out. It's not, it's like, I'm sure that happens, but that's kind of that would be a terrible way to live. But what happens is when I'm working this metal, it's this wordless conversation that's constantly happening. I act and the metal reacts, and I have to kind of steer this conversation in a direction, and that comes through effort, practice, repetition, and just like you were saying, all those things, and Mike was stating about craft, like all those things add up to this familiarity and this comfort, and that comes ease, and that to me is this intimacy, and it's an intimacy that is cozy, eventually, and it's like a worn-in shoe, and that spreads into good days, bad days. And as a craftsperson that I make a living out of my studio, that conversation has to spread outside of the studio. It happens when I'm making work, but I also need to take that intimacy and relay it to people that are possibly buying the work or I'm doing commission for, and that relationship that I have with the material has to be conveyed to the other, to the client, and then that causes a relationship with that client. And so now I've created this conversation and this intimacy with them. And so for me, craft is a conversation with myself and the material, a conversation with my clients and galleries, and collaboratively with my peers in the community. And that overarching, when I think about all of that, is this kind of intimacy with everyone involved. So thank you.
Hello. Good morning. So for me, craft as inheritance wasn't a big reach, because I currently have a garage that is completely stacked with Rubbermaids full of fabric and yarn and embroidery materials that I inherited from my mom and my grandmother. And they've been packed now for about 3 years. And hoping to unpack them soon, but it also involves doing a lot of other unpacking at the same time because they both passed away, and I that's how I got this stuff, right? So that was in 2015, and during that time and since then, I've used craft as a way to cope. And my whole life, I crafted with them. They taught me sewing and, well, they tried to teach me knitting, but it didn't work. I had to learn that separately, which I'm glad I did. But, all kinds of really amazing things. And but anybody that's gone through cancer knows that, if you've lost somebody, it doesn't really have to do with the time of their death. It has to do with the time of their diagnosis, because that's kind of where the whole journey starts and begins changing. So interestingly for me, interesting is a funny word there, but whatever. Sorry. The week that my mom was diagnosed with her peritoneal cancer was the same week that I launched a Kickstarter campaign to buy this giant German knitting machine, a machine that would let me knit so quickly. And those are two really different types of promises, right? Like somebody gets cancer and you promise to be there with them through the whole thing. And then you do a Kickstarter campaign and you make a promise to people on the internet that you will fulfill something or you will get hate mail. That's essentially how that works. So, yeah. So I went forward with both things, and I tried to be there, and I was there for my mom through so much, and we were there together, but I also had to not be there at times because I had to go to Germany for 2 months to just learn how to use this knitting machine. Side note, I actually figured out after getting the machine that what I really wanted to do was do hand knitting. I like that a lot better, but sometimes you just don't know until you know. So while I was in Germany, my mom had this major surgery. It was her first major surgery, and I wasn't there, which was hard, but I did spend a lot of time there on weekends just exploring and trying to stay really occupied. And so one of the last couple weekends I was there, I had explored this entire amazing town. It was called Tübingen, and there's is at the highest point of this town, that little tiny, like you can't see that castle from above. It's the Hohen-Tübingen Castle. It's an 11th century castle, but I didn't know because I didn't speak German. So there's that little hole that's like a doorway to it. And I finally was like, okay, I'm going to go through the hole. And I found this museum, a museum of ancient culture. And so I didn't inherit this from my family, but my other passion is archaeology and anthropology. And I wanted to be an archaeologist until I moved to Asheville and learned that there were no archaeology jobs. So I pursued the less likely career of knitting. Just crazy. And so I went in there and I found, amazing exhibits with Egyptian, artifacts and Greek and Roman, but this one room is full of tiny sculptures. They're this big. And they're 40,000 years old. So that's old, like really old. Like I'm 30 and 40,000 years old, it's incredible. So there's a network of 6 caves throughout France and Germany that people lived in 40,000 years ago during the Ice Age, and they were making these. This is a saber-toothed tiger. They took what they saw and they made these things, and they weren't making weapons, they were making art, and I put so many things in perspective for me, and I think that we all have now inherited the essential need to make things. It's part of the human DNA, and if people in the Ice Age can sit in caves and craft to get through it, they didn't even know there was like an it to get through, right? then we can do it too. So thank you guys.
Hey, thanks, y'all. So happy to be here. My craft used to be singing. It was what I did for a study and for a living. It was also how I connected to my soul, and how I calmed myself down when I was nervous. So, all of me, why not take all of me? Can't you see I'm no good without you? Take my lips, I want to lose them. Take my arms, I'll never use them. Your goodbyes left me with eyes that cry. How can I go on, dear, without you? You took the part that once was my heart, so why not take all of me? Yeah, so I was kind of born that way, able to sing, and like was mentioned in my bio, could vision for days, talk for hours, never stopping. I had whimsicalness and fun and love running through my blood. It felt very easy. I was extremely bossy, and it was fun. And I felt like I was winning at life all the time. And then something shifted for me. At some point in my life, I started listening a little bit too intently to what other people had to say. I started paying attention to what you were describing as your vision for success, also for intelligence and for beauty. And I started to contort myself. And my craft became perfectionism and contortion. And somewhere along the way of doing that, having been completely lost from that original craft of singing and joyfulness and playfulness and visioning, I got this diagnosis of cancer. And in the process, I received this diagnosis, which is just incredibly heart-wrenching and impossible. And the first thing you think is, oh, okay, I'm gonna die. And I was given this option. I was given one option, so it's not even an option. I was just told by the doctor that the only way to prevent it from coming back, and so the only way to save myself, was to have this massive surgery where I took out a bunch of essential organs. And I, kind of further dismembering myself from myself. So I was going to become these parts. And for the first time since I was a little girl in so many years, I got this just deep hit of intuition, and it was like the whole world got quiet, and I listened to myself for the first time in a really long time, and I looked at her and I said, no, but I'll get back to you if I need some organs removed. So. And I meant it, because I honestly didn't know if no was really, where that was going to take me. But so what I started doing from that point on, what ensued following that was this way of becoming closer to my soul. So each and every day. So this is through tears, right? So of course I went to bed crying and I woke up crying and spent a lot of days in grief. But I quit my job and I planned to get married and I started a new career that went nothing like I expected because I was dealing with cancer. And I would wake up each and every day with this question for myself of to my highest self, to my higher power, to my soul, of what will you have me be today? And I had to tune in that way in which our soul really drives our craft, that way in which we know so deeply that deep down in there is the true guide and journey for what we are intended to do and to be in this world. And, it's interesting because I was terrified. I was terrified that somehow if I didn't follow your instructions, and yours universal, the magazines and everything, but if I didn't follow the instructions of society, that I would somehow lose. And so this process of coming back to myself over and over and over again took time. But the beauty of it is that I am so much more available to you all than I ever was in these contorted forms of myself. The work that I do is so much more powerful and meaningful, and I have an exponentially bigger impact on my community now than I ever did before. So my message, my lesson, and the thing that I am still journeying through today is to wake up, and sometimes it's week by week, but often it's moment by moment, and tuning in and listening in a deeper way for what I'm intended to do and to be. So thank you.
Hey. So when I was little, my mom works for a big pharmaceutical company, and my dad was a banker. They're so proud of their only daughter. My mom said when I was 4 years old, we lived in Los Angeles, California, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I said, "I want to be a farmer." She was like, "Cool." Little did I know I would blow them out of the water and get to grow up to be a professional foraging witch. So y'all dream big. So I'm a craftsperson in a lot of different ways, and I teach spoon carving, basket weaving. I'm a botanical illustrator, I'm a musician, but those aren't really what I identify as my crafts. One of the reasons I was drawn to these mountains from Vermont, I moved here in 2010, was because I was interested in what was under the ground, not on top. Appalachian folk culture. Being from Western Pennsylvania originally, most of my family is from the Pittsburgh area and Ohio and West Virginia, it felt like the only thing I could do to find family or a connection. And I thought about always being connected to and drawn to being a witch. What does that mean? What do I do? Can I even tell people that? Is it normal? It's not normal, let's be real. But how could I show up for my community and share my love of Appalachian folk magic and plant uses, this super specific, highly in demand topic? So for me, I started asking myself, what is the craft of the witch? And I still don't know, so I'm sorry if you wanted to know. I don't. But I have some ideas, and I think for me, I was listening to a lot of interviews and interviewing a lot of folk magical practitioners in the region, especially North Carolina, and I was talking to an older person who shared with me this story. And there were a lot of people in these mountains who obviously didn't have access to modern medical technology, especially around the 30s to 40s when that technology wasn't necessarily more effective than witchcraft. So many people turned to the witches in their communities or the Yarb men and women who knew how to heal with plants and knew how to spiritually comfort people. And that was what I wanted to tap into. And I thought of this story where a woman had severe pains in her leg. I guess it's what people used to call chilblains, which sounds extremely uncomfortable. And I don't know exactly what that means. They called their local practitioner, who was an older man, and all he brought with him, they were expecting he'd have a doctor's bag or some plants or something, was a red handkerchief. And he got down on the ground and started rubbing the woman's leg really hard and furiously with this handkerchief and whispering. And soon, a lizard popped straight out of her leg, and she was like, "Hallelujah, I'm healed, the pain is gone." He's like, "There it is, it jumped right out." It's that little lizard. Now, unfortunately, the woman's daughter was standing behind him the whole time, saw he had dropped a lizard out of his sleeve. And she was like, "Nice try. I know what you did. You threw that lizard out. Why did you trick my mom like that?" He was like, I didn't trick her. I just gave her what she wanted. She wasn't really in pain. She just needed to be told that it was going to go away. And I gave her what she needed. And to me, I was like, that's the craft of the witch, is to show up for your community in the way they need you to, which can look a lot of different ways. So today I slept past my alarm. I'm so sorry. This is why I'm wearing my glasses. And I was like, I just need to wear my witchy clothes and definitely wear all black and some lace. I had to throw a yellow dress on, and I was like, I'm just showing up the way I need to today. This is my craft. Just to barely make it on time. You know, thank God I have a broomstick, right? Because otherwise, y'all, that traffic on 26, let's be real. So to bring it back together, for me, I want to remind everyone that, so many people ask me, like, oh, I wish I could do what you do, which first off, I'm like, it's not lucrative, but it's really fun. You can. You're all already magical practitioners in whatever way you want to be, and in the ways our community shapes you to be. And you get to choose how that is. And I think that's really the most important thing about witchcraft and the craft of magic. And that doesn't mean you have to identify as a witch, because you're all healers, like Marisol was speaking to. We all have that power. So thank you guys so much today. It's been a pleasure.